Hey guys, tonight we're descending, quite literally, into the quiet, glimmering world of medieval Polish salt mines. You've probably heard of gold miners, maybe coal miners too. But tonight, we're going to take a lantern and a deep breath and find out what it was really like to be a salt miner beneath the chilly stone of 14th century Poland. Spoiler alert, you probably wouldn't survive this, not because of the danger, though there's plenty of that, but because it's cold, dark, damp, and the workday starts long before the sun does. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're feeling cozy already, drop a comment with your local time and where in the world you're drifting off from tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It begins, as it always does, in the dark, not the velvet dark of midnight, not even the soot-black dark of a room with the shutters closed. This is the ancient, toothless, kind of dark that lives beneath the earth. You sleep beside a lantern that ran out 3 hours ago, but you know it's morning. The chapel above is waking. You can hear it. Not the bells that would come later, but the dull, scratchy sound of footsteps overhead, filtered through wood and stone. Nuns, probably starting the prayers. Your own prayers will come later, and they'll be shorter. There's a difference between heavenly intercession and hoping the ceiling doesn't fall on your head today. Your blanket is stiff from the salt in the air. It never fully dries, no matter how long it hangs. And your back is sore. Of course it is. No one sleeps well on a bed of straw and rock, wrapped in crusted wool. But still you get up. The first thing you notice, always, is the smell. That sharp, briny scent that prickles your nose like cold vinegar. Salt and rope and damp boots. It's oddly clean and yet deeply earthy, like the inside of an ancient pantry. Your boots go on with some protest. They never quite come off either. At least not mentally. They live on your feet, the same way the mine lives in your bones. You shuffle toward the narrow wooden beam that marks the tunnel entrance. There's no door, just a hanging of rough cloth. Once embroidered, now faded into a map of salt crust. Stanisław is already there, huddled beside the wall, fiddling with a copper medallion tied around his wrist. He does that before every shift. Says it was his mother's. Says it keeps the ghosts out of his head. You've never asked what ghosts? Exactly. The two of you exchange a grunt that counts as good morning. He hands you a stub of wax candle and a rusted flint striker. They said we're back on chapel wall today, he mutters, not looking at you. More carving. The bishop wants St. Kingja to have curls now. You raise an eyebrow. Did she? Stanisław shrugs. Historians still argue whether she ever had hair under that veil. You both chuckle. The air wheezes from your breath and leaves a tiny cloud that vanishes in the chill. Time to go. You strike the flint. It doesn't catch. Try again and again. There it is, just a flicker at first, then a full flame kissing the end of the wax. You cradle the stub with a cupped hand and begin walking. The tunnel narrows after 10 paces. It always does. The stone walls are slick with condensation, the salt-absorbing moisture from your very breath. You can't help but run your fingers across the rock. Feel the granular drag under your calluses. It's beautiful, in its own silent way, like walking through the ribcage of a sleeping colossus. The chapel wall is 2 turns past the old wooden barrel, where the ceiling collapsed last spring. No one's cleared it. The barrel's still there, half smashed, half swallowed by rubble. You pass it carefully, nodding to it like an old acquaintance. At the carving wall, someone's left a chunk of salted bread stuck into a crevice, likely a half-hearted offering to keep the spirits content. Or maybe it's just Jersey being lazy with his lunch again. You and Stanisław unpack your tools. Yours are older wooden shaft, iron pick, worn smooth from years of grip. His chisel has a chip in it, but he won't fix it. Says the chip gives it character. You don't argue. Everyone in the mine has quirks. It's what keeps you sane. Your first task today, outline the curls. Not your usual digging, but slow, delicate carving. The kind of work that makes your arms ache, not from force, but from holding steady. You trace the outline with charcoal, careful not to breathe too hard near the dust. Then, ever so gently, you begin to chip. Tap, tap, scrape, tap. The echo of your rhythm travels down the tunnel like distant drumming. Faint but persistent, you pause, stretching your neck. Overhead, a single drop of water falls from the ceiling and splashes onto your wrist. Cool as a ghost's sigh, you rub it in. Everything is damp. Always. Stanisław Hum-Satuni. You don't know the words. He never sings them, just hums the melody, soft and slow, like something passed down through dream rather than family. You keep carving. Hours pass, but you wouldn't know it. No windows, no clocks, just the rhythm of pick and breath, and the occasional whispered joke. Lunch will come later. For now, the statue is watching you. And St. Kinga doesn't blink, but the light shifts slightly behind her shoulder, and you could swear someone is there just around the bend of the tunnel. You lean forward, but you don't see anyone. At least, not yet. The first blister came years ago, and it never really left. Your hands tell your story better than any scroll ever could. Scarred, calloused, and always slightly gritty, no matter how often you rinse them in the brine basin. This morning, the left thumb is already bleeding, not from anything dramatic, just the way the handle of your pick rubs against that soft spot near the nail. A raw little reminder that even slow work, done long enough, will wear you down. You cradle the tool for a moment. The shaft is made from ash wood, smoothed over time by hundreds of palms. It's yours now, but you can feel the ghosts of former miners in the worn finger grooves. Yannick the Tall, who once carved a dragon in the lower vault. Jurek the Sleepwalker, who chipped away in his dreams and once woke up halfway to Krakow. You adjust your grip and try not to think about them too much. The day's work doesn't shout. It hums, a dull, vibrating ache through your joints as you strike the wall. Again and again, flaking off chunks of crystalline salt, no bigger than the nail on your smallest finger. Each flake falls with a faint metallic clink into the collection trough, a sound you've grown so used to. It's practically lullaby. Stanisław's down the tunnel now, grunting softly. He's clearing an old brine channel that collapsed last winter. When the ceiling dripped faster than the buckets could handle, you hear him curse, then laugh, then mutter a quiet sorry toward the chapel niche. He does that sometimes, apologizes to St. Kinga, even if she's just a lumpy silhouette carved out of the rock. You've caught yourself doing it too, usually when a tool slips or when you step on someone's half-finished sculpture by mistakes. The tools themselves feel ancient. Some of them are iron picks passed down like heirlooms, a copper trowel that someone insists came from Hungary, though no one remembers how. There's a joke about that trowel. It's been in the family so long. We've replaced both the head and the handle twice. You smirk at the memory. It's the kind of humor that only really works underground. Surface folk wouldn't get it. They'd look at your tools like museum pieces, but to you, they're just hands you can extend. The salt itself is unpredictable. Some days, it's soft and yielding, almost waxy. Other days, it's stubborn as granite, ringing like glass with every strike. Today, It's somewhere in between. Resistant, but not cruel. You'll take it. Mid-morning comes and goes without sunlight. You judge the time by the ache in your back and the angle of Stanislaus singing. It's louder now, which means he's finished with the brine duct and moved closer again. He comes around the bend, holding something in both hands, an old wooden wedge split clean through. Snapped it, he says simply. You take it. Examine the grain. It was warped to begin with. Too much moisture. You pass him a fresh wedge from the pack. He nods. Think Jersey's coming back today? He asks. You shrug. Jersey's been gone for 3 days. Said his cousin needed help digging a well. Or maybe it was his wife's goats. Jersey always has a cousin. Or a goat. Or a cousin's goat. It's hard to keep track. But he'll be back. He owes too many people favors to stay away long. You return to your carving. Your fingers are starting to cramp now. You switch hands, not because it's comfortable, but because it spreads out the suffering. You remember once asking the steward for gloves. He laughed. The salt is glove enough, he said. It finds every wound, so you learn not to make them. Helpful. You pause to sip water from a flask wrapped in oilskin. It tastes faintly of iron and something older, maybe the flask itself. But it's cool, and it washes the salt from your throat. For now, there's a rustle in your pack, something shifting against your hip. You reach in and pull out a bit of parchment. A prayer, maybe folded carefully. You didn't put it there. You look at Stanislaus. He's carving with his back to you, whistling through his teeth. You slip the parchment back. Better not ask. Down here, little gifts appear. Sometimes, prayers, lucky charms, even bits of sugared plum. If someone's been to the surface recently, you get back to it. Tap, scrape, breathe, adjust grip, shift weight, tap again. Above you, the ceiling creaks. It's not the dangerous kind of creak, not the sharp crack of splitting timber, or the rushing moan of a falling shaft. It's the old bones kind of sound, settling, stretching, like the mine itself is sighing in its sleep. You find comfort in that, in a strange way. You've always imagined the mine as a great beast, not threatening. Exactly, but enormous. Patient, slow, breathing through the tunnels, pulsing with the rhythm of brine and boots. Some say it has moods, that it likes certain miners more than others. You're not sure about that, but you do try to stay polite. You shift your pick to your other shoulder and begin to shape the next outline. The salt glows faintly in your candlelight, an amber white shimmer like old bone under wet skin. It's oddly beautiful. And then you hear it. A scratch, not like a tool, not like stone. It's softer, like fingers. Just behind the chapel wall, you freeze. Stanislaus doesn't seem to notice. You raise your candle, inching forward. Maybe it's nothing, but tomorrow, the scratch marks are still there, and they weren't made by any tool you recognize. The scent hits you before you see anything. Wet rope, earthy, fibrous, and just a little sour. It's woven into everything down here. Into the bucket handles, into the pulley rigging, into the winch lines, and the harness straps, and even into your coat. It lingers in your hair, clings to your collar, soaks into your dreams. You pass beneath a heavy coil of it now, slung lazily across 2 wall pegs, the fibers still glistening from yesterday's brine run. It's been soaking all night, and now it drips, one slow drop at a time, forming a tiny puddle where the tunnel floor sags ever so slightly. You step over it without thinking, just like you always do. That same puddle's been there since you started, and it's never grown bigger. But it never dries either, like it's just always waiting. The rope leads toward the hauling shaft. the deepest part of the mine accessible to men without special permission or royal blood, or, as Jersey likes to say, without the bishop's bedtime kiss. You're not scheduled to haul anything today, but the creak of the wheel is calling to you. It's familiar, like an old story you only half remember, but still find yourself humming along to. At the shaft entrance, the winch is already turning. One Miovi, with the younger lads, Mirek, probably is walking in slow, practiced circles, pushing the long wooden arm around and around, back hunched, and boots scraping softly. The wheel groans in rhythm, a low, deep churn that you feel more in your ribs than your ears. Up comes a barrel dripping wet, salt-streaked, tied with 3 loops of that same rope. You reach out to steady the barrel as it settles onto the landing platform. Your hands instinctively brace its weight, and again, you feel it, the damp, splintered bite of the rope's edge. Even in gloves, the texture bites through. There's something ancient in that feeling, like you're touching a piece of the mine's memory, not just its tools. The barrel's lid creaks open under your grip. Salt blocks, smooth and uneven, their edges licked shiny by water and age. You knock one gently with your knuckle. It answers with a dense, chalky thud. Perfect, not too brittle. The steward will be pleased. Maybe even enough for a fresh loaf at supper. Behind you, Mirek sighs and wipes his forehead with a sleeve already stiff with salt. Third one today, he mutters, and the rope's starting to fray. You squint at it. He's right. Near the loop that holds the bucket harness, the fibers are beginning to splay. Not enough to panic, but enough to worry. We'll need a splice, you say. He nods. Tomorrow. Maybe, if we get the new hemp. But you both know that rope's been promised for 2 weeks, and promised things don't always arrive. Not this deep. Not this season. You leave the shaft and start back toward the chapel tunnel. As you walk, the smell of wet rope follows you, less of a scent now and more like a presence, a damp companion that tugs at your thoughts. You think of the surface, of rope drying in the sun, stretched over wooden beams behind barns, soaked in beeswax or fish oil or whatever secret blend each village swears by. Rope that doesn't smell like mold. Rope that crackles when it's dry, not squelches when it's handled. Funny how something so ordinary can become sacred when your life depends on it. Back near the chapel carving site, Stanisław is sitting on an overturned salt block, chewing on a piece of cured turnip. He raises an eyebrow when he sees your expression. Still thinking about the scratching, he asks. Not unkindly. You nod. I checked it earlier. He says, could be a rat. Big one. Rats don't draw lines. You murmur. He shrugs. Maybe it's the old miner's ghost, the one who used to steal lunches and hum to himself. You know Janek with the thumb? You shake your head. He didn't draw either. Stanisław chuckles. So now, it's an artistic ghost. You sit beside him. The carving of Saint Kinga is coming along. Her curls are delicate, like someone draped moss over her stone brow. You brush away a crust of salt dust from her shoulder. The face is gentle now, calmer than yesterday. The light hits her eyes just right, and for a second, they look wet. You glance at Stanisław. Did you do that? He frowns. Do what? You don't explain. Just nod. Let it go. Behind you! Another creak. Not the shaft this time. The rope, the one slung across the tunnel pegs. It shifts slightly. Just once. You stand and turn. Nothing's there. The puddle beneath it is a little wider now. Maybe the tunnel is settling again. Maybe the weight of the salt is warping the beams. Maybe that smell in the air, the wet rope, the brine, the slow rot of old hemp is making you see things that aren't there. Or maybe Tomorrow, someone will find a rope that's been carefully braided into a new shape, one no miner claims to have touched. Stanisław doesn't whistle underground. Not ever. He's told you that more than once. Usually with a furrowed brow and a sideways glance, like even mentioning it might tempt the mind to listen. Whistling calls the spirits. He once whispered while packing salted turnips into a leather pouch. The dead think it's a tune for them. You didn't believe him. Not at first. You'd grown up thinking minds were full of dust and sweat, not ghosts with favorite melodies. But then you saw what happened that one morning, when young Jakub broke into a merry whistle while shaping a tunnel brace. Nothing dramatic at first, just a tremble in the wall, a breath. Really? And then the ceiling groaned low and slow, like something exhaling after centuries of sleep. No one was hurt, thankfully. But for days afterward, tools vanished and ropes slipped from their pegs, and the chapel's salt crucifix cracked straight through the heart. Jakub never whistled again. He doesn't even hum. So, when Stanisław warns you again not to hum near the Saint Kinga statue, you don't argue. You just nod, silently, and let the weight of the air settle in around you. You're not a superstitious man. Or at least you weren't, back when you first started. But the mind changes people. Stanisław has his routines. You've learned to read them, like the grain in a timber beam. The way he taps the handle of his chisel 3 times before every shift. The tiny pinch of salt he tosses over his shoulder before entering a new tunnel. The way he touches the tips of his fingers to the carved eye of Saint Kinga once, then twice, then once again whenever someone mentions the royal inspectors. You can never be too careful with inspectors, he mutters now, as if reading your thoughts. You're carving in silence again, outlining the folds of Kinga's cloak with slow, practiced strokes. Every now and then your candle flutters, disturbed by some unseen draft. The wax has begun to drip in odd patterns. Fat globs that run sideways instead of down. You rotate it in your holder, watching the flame sway. There was a man, Stanisław says suddenly, back before your time. Boris, the Sootfoot. They say he carved a salt ladder to heaven. You look over. A what? He nods. Said he saw an angel in the ceiling drip. Started chiseling upward, one rung at a time. Ladder went so high, they had to seal the tunnel off. Too dangerous. They said, might touch heaven. They said, you can't help but smile. Did he ever finish it? No one knows. Some say he disappeared up there. Stanisław leans in, eyes gleaming with candlelight. Others say he's still climbing. You let the silence settle again, letting the soft scratch of your tool fill the space. It's a comforting sound, oddly enough. The repetition, the rhythm, like rocking in place, a lullaby carved from stone. A few moments later, you catch him tracing a strange symbol into the dust on the wall with one knuckle. A loop, then a line, then a backward swirl. You raise an eyebrow. Protection, he says. Old sign. My grandmother taught it to me. You think it works. He shrugs. I haven't fallen into a brine pool yet. You leave it at that. Lunch comes late today. Or maybe it's early. Time is hard to hold underground. You sit together on a thick slab of salt that serves as both bench and table. From his coat, Stanisław pulls out a boiled egg, wrapped in damp cloth. You trade him for a half stick of dried mushroom. No words are needed. The trade is equal, fair, old. While you eat, he tells another tale. Did you ever hear of the salt dog? You shake your head. They say there's a white hound that patrols the lower levels. Pure salt, eyes like candle glass. If you see him, you're safe. But if he doesn't see you, he doesn't finish the sentence, just takes another bite of egg. You chew in silence, thinking of the sounds you sometimes hear near the shaft. The scratchings, the soft panting, like wind through a tunnel. There's comfort in the stories, even when they're strange, maybe especially when they are. They give shape to the shadows, names to the bumps and creaks. And down here, everything is easier when it has a name. After lunch, you return to work. St. Kinga's Veil is nearly complete. You run your fingers along the groove, smoothing out a rough patch where your chisel slipped. It's oddly soft here. Not the usual hard-edged flake of salt, but a chalky crumble, like the stone has been hollowed out. You peer closer. Just beneath the surface, tucked behind a thin wall of crystal, is something wrapped. A bit of cloth, maybe, or paper. It's old, yellowed, preserved perfectly in the salt. You reach for your chisel, but Stanisław stops you. Don't open it. You freeze. Why not? He shrugs. Just don't. If someone wanted it found, they would have left it in a bucket. You hesitate. And for once, you listen. You leave it there, entombed. Just a whisper from the past. Or a warning. Later, as you pack up your tools and head back toward the sleeping quarters, you pass the wet rope again, still dripping, still waiting. The smell lingers on your coat, and far down the tunnel, you hear a faint, unmistakable sound, a whistle, just one note, and no one's supposed to be working that shaft today. There's a quiet kind of holiness down here, not the loud, echoing holiness of high cathedrals with incense and golden bells. No, this is the kind that settles in silence, a hush carved into the walls themselves. Down here, the saints are shaped by pickaxe and breath, and the altars smell like brine. You stand before one of the oldest chapels in the mine, hollowed out long before your time. Its walls curve gently inward, giving the illusion of a dome, though it's still square in structure. Every inch is touched by a miner's hand. The salt glistens in the flickering candlelight, casting soft reflections that make the saints seem to shimmer like they're exhaling. Saint Kinga is at the center, of course her likeness rising from the wall like it grew there. She's not beautiful in the way surface painters imagine. Her features are heavy, solemn, softened by centuries of salt dust and candle smoke. She looks like she belongs here, which, in a way, she does. Do you know the story? Stanisław asks, standing behind you, his voice no louder than a sigh. You nod. She threw her ring into the shaft. It turned into a salt vein. He smiles. Or so the legend says. Historians still argue whether Saint Kinga truly descended into the mine, or if her story was sweetened by generations of tired miners looking for meaning in the dust. But you don't need a historian to tell you she matters. Not when every fourth miner wears a ring on a chain. Not when her carved face is cleaner than the pay ledger. Today, you're here to help restore a chipped corner of the chapel. A worker's lantern slipped last week and scorched part of the salt relief, a minor burn, but enough to need smoothing. You kneel at the edge of the altar, unwrapping your smaller tools, a fine chisel, a wire brush, a soft cloth dampened with vinegar water. The tools for delicate work, ritual work. The air smells different here, sharper, somehow, as if the salt is fresher, or the ceiling slightly higher. Some say the chapel breathes. You've never been sure whether that's comforting or unnerving. You press the chisel into the wall, just at the edge of the damage, gently, a slow scrape, like drawing with stone. The sound is soothing, kind of dry whisper. You fall into rhythm quickly, tracing the curves of a faded angel wing that someone carved with far more care than was probably paid for. Above you, the ceiling is adorned with salt chandeliers. They don't sparkle like crystal, but they glow muted, warm, like snow at twilight. You pause to admire them every so often, just to give your fingers a break. and maybe to remind yourself that beauty can happen even 50 meters underground. Stanisław is busy with the corner base, straightening a crooked niche where pilgrims sometimes leave offerings. There's a dried violet pressed against the salt, left by someone who visited last week. He doesn't touch it, just works around it. Did I ever tell you about the miner who tried to carve his own face up here? He asks suddenly, brushing dust from the ledge. You glance over. Did it look anything like him? Not at all. He laughs. He said the salt made him look noble. Wife took one look and told him to do it again. Poor man had to dig himself a double chin just to make it honest. You chuckle, but your chisel catches on something. A hard lump inside the salt. You dig around it carefully, brushing the crystal away bit by bit. It's a coin, worn smooth, barely visible markings. Older than you. Older than even the chapel, maybe. Someone pressed it into the wall and buried it beneath the angel's wing. A wish, perhaps, or an offering, or a secret. You hold it up to the candlelight, watching how the salt clings to its edge. Then, quietly, you place it back and cover it over with a fresh layer of crushed white. Whatever the coin's story, it's not yours to tell. The work continues in silence. Occasionally, you hear soft footsteps from elsewhere in the mine, too far to identify, close enough to be real. Sometimes, they echo in the chapel longer than they should. Sound behaves oddly in this room. Words bounce in circles. Breaths come back to you in echoes that sound just slightly off. By midday, the wall is smooth again. The angel's wing curves gently into the rest of the relief. You wipe the surface clean with the damp cloth, feeling the cold sting through the fabric. You can taste the salt in the air, sharp and drying on your tongue. Stanisław steps back and surveys the scene. She looks pleased, he says, nodding toward Kinga. She always does. You reply. You pack up the tools slowly. There's no rush, no bells here, just the slow rhythm of candlelight, the creak of leather straps, the scent of wet rope still clinging faintly from earlier. You notice something strange before you leave. A single candle in the far alcove is flickering wildly, though no draft reaches it. Its flame spins, dancing left and right, then suddenly dies. Not snuffed, just gone. You and Stanisław both pause, say nothing. He lights a new taper, places it in the same spot. It stays still. He shrugs. Maybe she blinked. You leave the chapel in silence, but when you return the next day, that candle is gone. And in its place, a tiny salt carving of a bird with wings outstretched, one you don't remember carving. By the time your stomach begins its slow, polite protest, the salt dust on your hands has turned your fingertips pale and grainy. Hunger always arrives gently down here. No roaring pangs, no sudden collapse. Just a quiet sense that the rhythm of your pick has slowed, and the air smells less like brine and more like baked bread. Though you know there's no oven within half a mile. You and Stanisław retreat to your usual lunch bench, a low, flat shelf of salt someone once carved into a crude imitation of a table, complete with tiny legs at each end. The legs serve no purpose, of course, just flair. Jersey carved one into the shape of a goat's foot, then lost interest halfway through the second leg and left it a shapeless blob. That was 2 winters ago. No one's bothered to fix it. Somehow, that makes it feel more yours. You sit down with a soft groan, rubbing your knees. The floor is uneven, the light low, but the act of unwrapping lunch feels almost sacred. There's something comforting in the crinkle of wax cloth, the way your little parcel of food steams faintly in the cold air. Today, your meal is humble but dependable. A wedge of brown bread, a twist of soft cheese wrapped in leaves, and 2 pickled mushrooms bobbing gently in a beeswax-sealed pot. You pry it open with a thumbnail, the lid giving way with a satisfying pop. Stanisław eyes them like a man expecting treasure. Mushrooms again. You nod. From my cousin. He says they were blessed by a monk. Everything's blessed if it doesn't kill you. You pass him one anyway. He sniffs it, shrugs, and bites. The taste is strong, sharp, and earthy, with a vinegar tang that clears your nose. But it's good. It reminds you of autumn, of wet leaves, and cold cellars, and evenings where the whole village smelled of wood smoke and cabbage stew. Above you, a single droplet of brine lands on the table with a faint tap. No one flinches. That's just the mine settling again. A gentle reminder that you're its guest. Did you ever try the steward's lunch? Stanisław asks, licking mushroom juice from his thumb. You shake your head. He eats in the ledger room, doesn't he? So he says. But Jerzy told me once he saw him eating honeyed oats with raisins. You pretend to gasp. Imported raisins. Stanisław nods solemnly. From Hungary, no less. You both chuckle, imagining the steward spooning sweet porridge into his mouth, while the rest of you chew on bread that cracks like gravel, is the kind of humor only miners would understand. The walls are quiet around you. It's one of those rare pauses when everything holds still, the stone, the ropes, the air itself, even the salt seems to rest. You take a slow breath and let it out, the sound blending into the soft flicker of the nearby candle. It's moments like these that make the mine bearable. Stanisław pulls out a tiny wooden flute, carved from ash, and stained a dark reddish brown. He doesn't play it, just holds it in his hands, turning it over, like a worry stone. Used to belong to my brother, he says quietly. You nod. You've heard about his brother in bits and pieces. A quieter man, fell ill, didn't make it through one of the bitter winters. I keep thinking, I'll learn a song, he says, still not looking at you. But every time I bring it out, I forget how to start. You don't say anything. You just let the moment stretch, like the silence wants to hold space for him. A minute later, he tucks the flute back into his coat. The candle beside your bench gives a little crackle. The flame dips, then brightens again, probably just a stray draft. But Stanisław gives it a look anyway. Half curiosity, half suspicion. You finish the last bite of bread, wiping your fingers on the cloth. There's still a bit of salt on your knuckles. It never really goes away. As you rise, your legs complain. The stiffness is worse in the cold, but the warmth from the food helps, spreading slowly from your stomach outwards, like the ember glow of a hearth fire that you can almost remember sitting beside. You gather your things. Stanisław tucks the pot back into his satchel, still licking his teeth. Then he pauses. Do you hear that? You freeze. Tilt your head. It's faint, almost imperceptible. A slow, rhythmic knock. Tap, tap. Pause. Tap. Not the sharp, purposeful strike of a miner's pick. Something slower, lighter, as if someone were rapping gently on a hollow surface. You both turn toward the shaft corridor. Nothing. Just silence. Stanisław sniffs and mutters. Maybe Jerzy's back. But you're both thinking the same thing. Jerzy wouldn't tap like that. He stomps. He sings. He arrives with a sound like falling gravel. You head back to your posts anyway. As you walk, the candlelight dances along the walls, casting long shadows that sway behind you like they have somewhere else to be. The salt crunches underfoot in familiar rhythm. The smell of vinegar clings faintly to your fingers, sharp and pleasant. Lunch is over. The mine is waiting, and somewhere behind you, the tapping begins again. But by the time you turn around, the sound has stopped, and the brine puddle beneath the rope is suddenly dry. The first time you saw one, you mistook it for a drifting cloth, or maybe a piece of blackened parchment fluttering from the ceiling. The way it twisted in the stale air, silent, unpredictable, it almost looked alive. And it was a bat, just one of many that call this mine home. Their leathery wings folding into cracks, no wider than a candle flame. Now, you're used to them, mostly. Still, when one darts out from a dark crevice without warning, your breath catches for just a second. The flap of wings cuts through the stillness like a whispered warning. It's not loud, but in the deep hush of the tunnels, even a mouse sneeze could feel like a thunderclap. This one brushes past your ear close enough to disturb your hair, and then vanishes into the black. Stanisław chuckles from somewhere behind you. Lucky, he says. They say if a bat grazes your head, you'll find silver in your salt. You mutter, I'd prefer raisins in my bread. He snorts, that's too much to ask. You return to your station near the northern wall, a shaft that was once part of a side tunnel, but has since been repurposed as a temporary storage nook. The ceiling here is low enough to make taller men duck. Good thing you're not one of them, and the corners are thick with shadow. This is where the bats like to sleep, folded into rock like velvet coins. Dozens of them, silent as hanging gloves. They don't bother you much, unless, of course, they startle. Then you'll have a small storm of confusion and leathery chaos darting through your face. And if you're lucky, none of them will leave a present on your shoulder. You move slowly, keeping your lantern low. The shadows shift in ways you've learned not to interpret too literally. Everything flickers down here. Your light, your breath, your thoughts. You've once caught yourself speaking aloud to a pile of discarded rope because you thought it was someone kneeling. It wasn't. Still, better to talk than not. There's something oddly reassuring about the bats. Unlike the stories, the ghosts, the strange carvings and shifting tools, they're real, alive. You can point to them, count them, watch them blink. One in particular is hanging by itself near the wall, wings curled around its body like a cloak. It's smaller than the others. It's fur matted. You wonder how it got separated. You wonder if it's lonely. Then again, maybe it's just smart keeping distance from the others. You felt that too. Sometimes, farther along the tunnel, you come across an old pulley hook embedded in the wall, so rusted it's practically part of the salt now. You've passed it dozens of times. But today, there's something new. A line of salt dust, freshly disturbed, runs beneath it in a perfect crescent. You kneel to inspect it, brushing your fingers gently across the stone. Footprint, possibly, but the shape is off too round at the heel, too narrow at the toe. You glance up. The bat is still watching. You hear Stanisław whistle, not the cursed kind. Just a quick, sharp call. That means found something. You rise and make your way toward the sound, careful not to disturb the cluster of bats as you pass. Their wings twitch, but stay folded. Stanisław is standing near the old drainage alcove, pointing toward a carving. You squint at it. It's new, or at least newer than the surrounding wall. A small figure, etched crudely, but with surprising confidence, stands with arms raised and head tilted back. Around it are loops circular, swirling symbols that almost resemble wind, or song, or wings. You look at him. Yours, he shakes his head, wasn't here yesterday. I'd have remembered that. He leans in. Looks like the symbol your niece draws in the margins. The one she said meant sleep wind. You trace the carving gently with a gloved finger. The salt here is oddly smooth, unnaturally so, like it's been polished, licked. Even, you try not to dwell on that. Above, another flutter. This time, a larger bat glides silently past both your heads and lands directly above the carving. It settles on a protruding bit of stone and stays, watching. Maybe they like it. Stanisław Mutters. Maybe they made it. You reply, not quite joking. He grins. The salt bat cult. We'd need new uniforms. Capes. You say, definitely capes. The tension eases a little. That's how it always goes. Darkness, weirdness, then laughter. It's the only way to stay sane. Salt dust and sarcasm. That's the miner's way. You hear distant movement again, far off. Maybe beyond the pulley tunnel. The sound of boots, just a few steps. Then gone. Neither of you mentions it. You both pretend. It's another worker changing stations. Even if everyone else was supposed to be on the south side today. You return to your post for the final hour before evening break. But your mind drifts to bats that watch, to carvings that appear without hands, to sounds that stop the moment you listen. Your candle flickers, not from a draft, but from something smaller. A bat passes close, almost close enough to touch, and then wheels off into the dark. Your hair sways in its wake, and when you go to check the carving again, it's gone. But the bat remains. You don't notice it at first. The sound is so low, so gradual. It seeps into your bones before your ears catch it. A faint, aching creak that pulses through the walls like a breath held too long. The ceiling groans not all at once, but in pieces. A wooden support beam shudders slightly. A scatter of dust drifts downward like powdered sugar shaken from an invisible sieve. You stop mid-strike, your chisel frozen against the salt wall. Even Stanisław halts, eyes lifting toward the darkened arch of rock above. There's a hush between you, heavier than silence. Then, as if nothing happened, the groaning ceases. The mine exhales. Dust settles. You both return to work, but slower now. Your eyes flicking upward more often than before. It's not that you're afraid. It's that you respect the weight above your head, the tons and tons of rock and earth that sit quietly. Most days, like an obedient beast, but every once in a while, the beast stirs, reminds you it's alive, and that it's old, much older than you. The beams overhead are sturdy enough, oak, reinforced with iron brackets, thick with tar and prayers. Some of the supports have been standing for generations. They're not smoothed by passing shoulders. You've run your fingers over their carved initials more times than you can count. K.T. 641, Re. G. 381, and the faintest one of all just a symbol, really, a spiral in a box, pressed into the wood like a brand. You don't know what it means, and no one talks about it. Stanisław once called it the mark you don't ask about. That was enough for you. The groan comes again this time, a long, slow yawn from the tunnel behind you. You turn, expecting to see someone. Nothing, just the salt corridor stretching into flickering dark, lit by a candle mounted on a rusted sconce. That wasn't the ceiling. You say aloud, "No." Stanisław agrees. That was the floor shifting. Even worse, you kneel to check the braces. The timbers are dry, no fresh cracking, no water pooled beneath. You give one a good tap with your knuckles. Solid. Then again. Many things sound solid until they aren't. Hefting your pick, you set it aside for now and kneel to run your hand along the floor. Salt tiles, mostly smooth, some fractured. One of them just off-center feels different. It rings when tapped, faintly, like something hollow beneath. You glance at Stanisław. Hear that? He nods. Another chamber. Maybe. You both listen, ears tilted slightly, and then, ever so faintly, you hear it. Not a groan, not a drip, but a soft scratching, like nails on wood or claws on stone. You sit back slowly. Could be rats. You offer, not even convincing yourself. Stanisław doesn't respond. He's staring down the tunnel where the flickering candle now burns a little lower. Could be, he says at last. You both decide to work a bit closer to the main shaft. Safer, more light, more people nearby. If you can call 3 other miners. People nearby. It's a relative term down here. As you walk, your boots crunch through a thin layer of salt dust. The ground here is dry, packed hard from generations of passage. It's one of the older routes, a corridor that once led pilgrims toward the inner chapels before deeper mining rerouted traffic. The walls here are etched with faint images, crosses, initials, 1 or 2 oddly shaped fish that no one claims credit for. You run your fingers across a particularly smooth patch of wall and pause. It's warm, just faintly. Not hot, not dangerous, just not cold. Not like everything else. You pull back your glove and place your bare hand on it. Definitely warmer than the surrounding stone. Stanisław watches, but says nothing. Just raises an eyebrow. Brine pocket. You guess. Could be. He replies again. Everything could be down here. You leave the wall alone, back at the main shaft. The rope from earlier has been retied. The frayed section replaced with fresh hemp that smells of beeswax and sun. You pause to admire it. The contrast is stark. The golden cord against the old gray, like new life grafted onto tired limbs. Mirek is walking the winch again, sweat on his brow, boots dragging in their usual half circle. He nods as you pass, but doesn't speak. Everyone's quieter than usual today. You lower your tools into a side alcove. A basket of spare chisels, a folded rag, a pouch of coarse sand used for grit. Everything in its place, but something is off. There's a small carving on the back wall. One you don't remember seeing this morning. A spiral in a box, just like the one on the timber. But this one is fresher, still sharp at the edges. No salt erosion yet. You glance around. No one nearby. You brush at it with your glove, but it doesn't fade. It's not chalk. It's carved. You don't mention it to Stanisław. Not yet. Instead, you focus on your work. Anything to keep your mind from drifting toward the groans. The scratches, the markings. The mind creaks again. Soft, distant, then silence. And somewhere behind you, the candle near the chapel sputters out. But when you relight it the next day, there's salt dust pooled neatly in a spiral right where the flame had died. Somewhere, between boredom and prayer, the salt walls began to talk, not with voices, of course not, in any way that would rattle a rational mind, but in carvings, in tiny, tucked-away etchings and strange little statues, tucked behind beams or perched atop ledges, only reachable by a very determined miner on a lunch break. It starts innocently enough. You notice a small figure carved beside the chapel alcove, a pig, squat and round, with a slightly crooked tail. Its expression is frozen mid-squeal, and it appears to be chasing something or someone. You squint. Just ahead of the pig is another figure, robes flapping, arms up in dismay. A priest. You glance at Stanisław, who's nearby, polishing the edge of a rail. Have you seen this? He wanders over and snorts. The pig returns. That's the third version. First one was just the pig. Second, had the pig and a loaf of bread. Now, the bread's gone, and it's a priest. You grin. Evolution. He grins back. Or confession. Whoever's behind the carvings never claims credit. They just appear overnight. Sometimes, other times, you turn your back for a few hours and something new has arrived. A salt cat curled near the prayer bench, a man riding a chicken, a bishop holding a balloon. None of it makes sense. All of it feels intentional. Some say it's Jersey. Others suspect Mirek. There's even a rumor that it's the steward himself, indulging in a secret whimsy he dares not show above ground. But no one ever catches them in the act. You decide to keep an eye out, not to scold no one minds. Really, but to understand, there's something reassuring in these strange, silly statues. Like the mine is telling jokes to itself, or maybe to you. Later that shift, you're clearing a stretch of tunnel just west of the chapel. An unused corridor with odd acoustics, where footsteps echo twice and candlelight seems to fold inward. It's where the old brine pails were once stored, and it still smells faintly of iron and rope oil. As you scrub away a buildup of salt crust near the base of the wall, your chisel knocks against something hard, not stone, metal. You dig gently, clearing away the powdery salt. It's a hinge buried in the wall. You blink. No doorframe, no handle, just the hinge. Rusted, but real, sunk partway into the rock. The wall around it is smooth, but a faint vertical seam runs from floor to ceiling. Hidden once, now exposed. Stanisław, you call softly. He joins you, eyes narrowing as he runs a finger down the seam. Well, he mutters, that's new. We're very old. You both try pushing. Nothing. Pulling. No luck? Tapping produces a hollow, dull sound. It's a door, or was one once. But now it's fused into place, entombed by time and salt. He shrugs. Another story for the pile. You make a mental note of the spot. Back in the chapel, there's a new addition to the St. Kinga wall. A delicate carving of a hand, palm upward, with a salt crystal resting in the center. No signature, just left there quietly, waiting for someone to notice. You do. You press your gloved fingers to the carved hand, then pause. Beneath the crystal, someone has etched 3 tiny letters, S-C-M. You ask Stanisław if he recognizes them. He shakes his head, but his face twitches just slightly. Says nothing to me, he replies. A little too quickly. You let it go for now. During your evening break, you head to the wash basin. Little more than a bucket of cool brine filtered from the upper shaft. You scrub your hands, watching salt swirl away from your knuckles in ghostly ribbons. Carved into the rim of the basin is another message. This one less elegant, more like a rushed scrawl. Don't whistle when the walls are listening. You stare at it for a long moment, then turn around slowly. Nothing, just the faint shuffle of boots and the drip of water. You dry your hands and head back to your bunk. That night, before you fall asleep, you find a small pile of carved salt animals beside your cot. 3 pigs, a horse, and what appears to be a bishop in a bathtub. You blink slowly. No one else is in the room. You place them gently in the alcove near your lantern, lining them up like tiny guardians. And when you wake the next morning, one of the pigs is missing, and a tiny carved door has been left in its place, just big enough for something small to walk through. You've heard the story a dozen times, maybe more. Everyone in the mine tells it a little differently, with the kind of reverence usually reserved for saints or kings. It always begins the same way, though with someone asking, quietly, like it's a riddle. Do you know how they got the horses down here? You do. At least, you've heard the version Stanisław tells. He says it happened at night, rain pouring outside, ropes greased with bear fat, a priest muttering blessings, while a stable boy cried into his sleeve. The horses, 2 of them, were lowered, blindfolded, into the shaft, one plodding hoof step at a time, suspended by a harness of woven leather and whispered apologies. They brought them down alive. That part is true. You've seen the evidence. The hoof prints are still there in the oldest chamber, the wide, worn divots where the soft salt gave under their weight. You've run your fingers across them? Real. Indented. Preserved. They called the first one Basia, Amare, dapple gray. She worked the turnstile for 9 years, pulling barrels of salt, day in and day out, walking the same circle until she didn't anymore. Did she die down here? You asked Stanisław once. He shook his head. She retired. To where? He just smiled and said, some place with no stairs. The second horse, Vitek, didn't last as long. Too nervous. They said he never got used to the dark, would shiver at the sound of dripping brine, bolt at the sight of candlelight. One day, he slipped his harness and ran right into a sealed tunnel. They found him hours later, nose pressed against a wall he couldn't get past. He left hoofprints too, the kind you don't touch. No horses now, not for years. The mine switched to pulleys and clever gears, and the few who remember, the horses are growing old. Still, you think of them, especially when you pass the circular chamber near the southern gallery. It's empty now, used only for storage, but the floor still bears the worn groove of 1,000 slow, patient circles, the kind of loop only a creature without complaint would make. You step inside sometimes, just to hear the echo of your own boots crossing that invisible track. You walk it slowly, once, twice. The third time, you swear you hear a second set of steps just behind your own. But when you stop, the echo keeps going. Once, Stanisław dared you to sleep in the chamber overnight. See if Basia visits, he said with a smirk. You didn't do it. Not because you were scared, but because some places feel like they're already occupied, even when they're quiet. Especially when they're quiet, you've noticed something else. Too unwritten, unspoken. The horses are never carved. In a mine, full of little jokes and saints and pigs chasing bishops. No one ever sculpts a horse. You asked Mirek why once, half joking. He didn't answer, just looked at you, serious, and said, some things carve themselves. Today, near the turnstile chamber, you find something new. Not a carving. A tuft of hair, gray, coarse, stuck to the edge of a wooden beam, as if brushed off by something large in passing. You pick it up, roll it between your fingers. Definitely not from a miner's coat. It's too thick, too bristly, like horse mane. You glance around. Nothing. You pocket it without a word. Later, back near the chapel, you mention it casually to Stanisław. He just nods. They say sometimes you can hear the bridle jingle if you're walking alone. You don't answer. You're not alone today, but the tunnel still feels attentive, like it's listening in, remembering. That night, while sorting tools by the central shaft, you find one of the old harness buckles tarnished bronze, still looped with a scrap of fraying leather. It's resting neatly atop a pile of firewood. You ask the others. No one claims it. You hold it for a moment, warm from the surrounding salt air, and feel something old and patient pressing against your chest. Gratitude, maybe, or warning. Before you turn in, you walk back to the turnstile room one last time. Place the buckle on the edge of the old walking groove, a quiet offering. You don't say a word, but as you leave, you hear the soft, unmistakable sound of a hoof against salt, just once far behind you. There's a game you used to play when you first started down here, a simple one, passed around by bored apprentices and younger miners. Too green to know better, you'd walk to a quiet part of the tunnel, cup your hands around your mouth and call out a word. Any word, usually something silly, something harmless. Then you'd listen, not for the first echo. That one always came back sharp and true. But the second one, the echo after the echo, the one that didn't match the word you said. Today, you find yourself near one of those echo chambers again. It's a broad, flat intersection of 4 branching shafts, long since abandoned for anything but storage. The walls here are smooth, almost polished. Some say the rock itself sings. Others say the acoustics are an accident of geometry and silence and salt. You don't believe in accidents. The game starts without thinking. You shift your lantern from one hand to the other, square your shoulders, and say softly, "Butter." The first echo returns obediently. Butter, butter. Then silence. Then, brother, you frown. Could have misheard. The acoustics play tricks sometimes. Your own voice loops back with a twist, a bend, a salt-doled edge. You try again. Pickle, pickle, ickle, then trickle. A bit unsettling, but still explainable. You shake your head and prepare to move on. That's when Stanislaw rounds the corner, carrying a bucket of spare wedges. "Don't play the echo game alone," he says flatly. You smirk. "Why not?" He pauses, then leans in just a little. Once, a boy named Tomasz played it for too long, asked too many questions. Eventually, the echo started asking back. You laugh. And what did it ask? He shrugs. No one knows. He left the mine the next day, never came back. You both stand there for a moment in the center of the echo chamber. The only sound, your breathing, the distant drip of water, and the soft hiss of your lantern's flame. Then, without warning, Stanislav cups his hands and calls out, "King!" You wait. "King! Ing!" A pause. Then ring. He doesn't flinch. "See," he says. It listens. You continue walking. That room stays with you for the rest of the day. The way it swallowed your words, then spat them back, with just enough difference to make your skin itch. You try to shake it off as you return to carving detail into the salt wall, a cluster of grapes for the feast scene being slowly shaped beside the chapel's side altar. The salt here is soft, almost too soft, like the wall's been worked already, smooth before you got here. Your chisel slides in cleanly, too cleanly. You pause. Run your fingers across the section. There's already a pattern, faint, but present small, round shapes, circles, overlapping, not grapes, ears, a dozen ears, each carved slightly differently, some small, some long-lobed, some pointed, all facing the same way toward the tunnel. You glance over your shoulder, no one there. You don't call Stanislav this time. You smooth over the carving, layer by layer, until only fresh salt remains. Better that way. After your shift, you walk past the chapel echo chamber again. It's quiet now, still, but carved into the wall beside the central beam is a new message, small, barely visible. You listened. No one else sees it. Or maybe no one else says they do. You take a step back, your boots crunching on stray crystals. Then another echo rises, not from you, from somewhere deeper. A voice. It doesn't say a word. It just breathes in, out, like it's been listening all along. And when you check your tools later, one chisel is missing, replaced with one you don't recognize. Smooth as bone and cold to the touch. You've lit hundreds of candles in your time below ground, maybe thousands. You've grown used to the way the flame flickers just before it settles, the way the wick curls like a sleeping insect after its first few breaths of fire. And always, always, that faint scent of tallow melting into the stale, mineral-heavy air. It becomes part of you, like the dust in your boots and the ache behind your eyes. But today's candle behaves differently. You're seated in the small alcove beside the southern support beam, the one you and Stanisław cleared out for tool maintenance. A quiet nook, out of the way, private, the perfect spot to repair a bent chisel or rewrap a frayed pick handle with boiled linen. Your candle stub is halfway melted, but the flame won't stay still. It leans left, then right, like it's being pushed by a wind that isn't there. The walls don't move. The air is dead still, and yet the flame dances. You squint at it, nothing visible. Then Stanisław appears, brushing salt from his gloves, still fighting with the wax. You gesture to the flame. It won't settle. He steps closer, frowns. Could be bad grease. What did you use? You lift the little pot of lamp paste you've been blending, a sticky mix of clay, old tallow, and a pinch of beeswax. Cheap, but usually reliable. This batch, though, has a sharpness to it. The smell bites the back of your nose. He dips a gloved finger in. Too much lard. And he sniffs. What is that? Lavender. You nod sheepishly. Found a vial in the steward's throwaway crate. Thought it might keep the bats away. Stanisław chuckles. It'll keep me away. Smells like the bishop's laundry. Still, he doesn't seem too bothered. He settles beside you, pulls out his own repair cloth, and begins oiling the hinges of a collapsible shovel, an absurd tool, really used more for impressing inspectors than actual digging. As the two of you work, the candle flame begins to settle finally. But now, it's doing something else. Every time you speak, it flutters, not in rhythm with your breath, but in rhythm with your voice. A soft word causes a long sway. A harsh word makes it twitch violently. You test it. Quiet. Sway. Loud. Twitch. Stanisław notices, too. What did you put in that grease? You don't answer. Instead, you take your brush and write a single letter on the salt floor in front of the candle. A crude O, drawn in ash from the old lantern wick. Then you watch. The flame leans forward, toward it. Stanisław frowns. Try another. You draw an X. This time, the flame bends away. He stares at it for a long time. Then, okay, time to talk about the salt alchemist. You raise an eyebrow. He was real. Stanisław insists, reaching into his coat for a scrap of cloth. Old miner. Back in the early 1300s. They say he spent so long down here that his sweat turned to brine, and his fingernails grew like quartz. He stopped eating food, just sipped grease and snuffed candle soot. You give him a skeptical look. I didn't say it was true. He shrugs. I said they say it. He leans closer to the candle. Whispers, alchemist. The flame flutters violently, rising nearly double its height before returning to normal. Neither of you speaks for a moment. The silence isn't heavy. It's alert. Stanisław looks at the mixture again. What exactly did you add? You list it quietly: tallow, wax scrapings, a pinch of ash from the prayer room, a few drops of lavender, and, well, one more thing. You pull it from your pouch. The small, bone-colored chisel you found yesterday. Smooth, unnaturally so. It still hasn't warmed to your touch, even though your palm's been sweating around it for hours. You don't know why you included it, just that it felt like it belonged in the mix. Stanisław stares at it. That's not one of ours. You nod. It was in my satchel. He doesn't touch it. Instead, he takes the candle and slowly pinches the flame out with a cloth. The smoke curls upward in a single twisting strand that lingers long after it should have dissipated. You both watch it fade. Let's not use that grease again, he says. Voice low. You agree. You scrape the mixture into a sealed pot. Bury it under a pile of used cloths. and leave the bone chisel on a stone shelf just for now. Later, back at your cot, you find the chisel again. Even though you left it behind, it's lying on your pillow. No salt dust on it, no tool marks, just clean, pale, and waiting. You pick it up, still cold, still wrong, and when you hold it near the candle to test the heat, the flame bends completely sideways, then extinguishes itself with a soft hiss, like it finally understood. They say the king only descended once, just once, for just an hour. It was King Kazimierz, the great yes, that Kazimierz, builder of castles, friend of scholars, father to many legitimate children, and slightly more illegitimate ones. He came down into the Wieliczka salt mine wearing boots of red leather and a cloak so clean it looked like it had never even heard of dust. Naturally, the mine tried to kill him, not on purpose, of course, but the minute he stepped into the shaft, pale and blinking, holding a perfumed kerchief to his nose, the ceiling groaned, the lanterns flickered, and one of the younger miners passed out entirely, convinced the mountain spirits were offended by the king's shoes. You've heard the tale 100 times. Every old-timer tells it differently. In one version, the king demanded a goblet carved from pure salt and drank from it only to spit it out because the water tasted like wet pickles. In another, he complimented a carving so earnestly that the steward wept and proposed a national holiday. In all versions, though, one thing is constant. He sneezed, not a polite, courtly sneeze, a real sneeze, the kind that echoes right there in the chapel vault. They say it echoed down all 5 tunnels, shook dust loose from ceiling beams, and caused a chunk of salt to fall directly into the royal boot. The king, naturally, laughed. It was everyone else who panicked. Legend says they spent 3 full days polishing the tunnel afterward just in case he ever came back, which he didn't. But that doesn't stop the mind from remembering. You've never seen his footsteps. Not exactly, but there's a spot near the center shaft, just left of the carved angel and directly beneath the salt chandelier, where the floor is unnaturally smooth, like something once stood there that people avoided ever stepping on again. Some say it's where the king paused. Others say it's where the sneeze echoed longest. Today, you pass that spot. You pause out of habit, not reverence, and glance up. The chandelier swings faintly, not from breeze. There's no breeze down here. You rub the back of your neck and keep walking. Later, during break, Stanisław Regales, a few of the younger miners, with his favorite version of the Kazimierz tale. In his retelling, the king tasted the wall and declared it deliciously crunchy, then accidentally stepped into the brine barrel, soaking his princely socks and causing such embarrassment that no member of the court has eaten pickled herring since. You chuckle as you munch on a bit of dried beetroot. The story's absurd, and yet strangely believable, because the thing about the king is that he did come down. That part is agreed on, and something did happen. The records confirm a minor incident, though no one quite agrees what it was. Some say it was the salt chunk. Others say the mine tried to swallow him. One steward's diary mentions the unusual echo of royal presence. No one knows what that means, but in the decades after, the mine changed, new chambers were named. A statue of King Kazimierz was commissioned, never finished, but the block still rests in the far hall, half formed, the crown carved, but the face left blank. You visit it sometimes. It's oddly peaceful, like the salt itself never quite decided what he looked like. Today, someone has draped a strip of red cloth over the base, faded, but unmistakable. It wasn't there yesterday, You ask around, no one admits to it. Stanisław claims he hasn't been near that corridor in weeks. You run your fingers along the rough edges of the half-carved crown. The salt here is coarser, flaking under your touch. You brush it away gently, revealing what might be the faint start of an eye, just the curve. Just enough to suggest that maybe someone had started to finish it. You light a small candle and set it on the ledge beside the statue. The flame flares once, then settles. In the silence that follows, you could swear you hear it. A single, dry sneeze. Far down the hall, you don't move. Neither does the flame. You blow it out and leave the statue in the dark. Back at your bunk, someone has scratched something into the salt wall beside your bed. Key. The G, no one calls him that. Not officially. Not above ground. And when you rub it away, the letters return by morning, etched a little deeper than before. And with a new addition, a tiny crown, carefully centered, carved by a hand steadier than yours. They say that if you spend long enough in the mine, the salt gets into your soul. At first, it's just under your nails, in your socks, in your breath. But over the years, it settles deeper into your skin, your voice, your thoughts. And for some, it does more than just linger. It marks them. You've seen it once or twice. Old miners with skin that gleams faintly, even in the dark. Not sweaty, not damp, just luminous, like candlelight clings to them longer than it should. Stanisław calls it the blessing, though his tone always carries a hint of irony. Today, you pass one of the oldest workers in the mine, Piotr with the cane. They call him. No one remembers how long he's worked here, but no one questions it either. His beard is silver, like crushed salt. His eyes look like polished coins. He never speaks above a whisper. As he walks past, the candlelight on the wall behind you seems to tilt toward him just slightly. You nod. He nods back, says nothing. But after he disappears into the eastern tunnel, the air behind him smells different. Less like brine. More like something clean, dry, old. You've heard the stories. Every mine has them. Men who've been down too long, who've become part of the salt. One old tale says the saints themselves dwell below, not in cathedrals or in sky-touched towers, but in mines, buried deep, sleeping in crystals. Saints who don't need marble. Saints who grow from walls. In the southern alcove, someone's carved a new statue, small, maybe 2 hands high. No bazi, no name, just a robed figure with its hands outstretched. Palms glowing with white mineral veins that shimmer like frost. It wasn't there yesterday. You ask around. Everyone denies it. You try to ignore it, but you see it again. That evening, moved. Just a little. It's now standing closer to the wall, hands turned inward, as if listening. You think of Piotr's strange glow, of how the air bent around him, of how the salt never seems to stick to his boots. Stanisław joins you later, carrying a fresh lamp. He sees the statue and stops short. Who did that? You shrug. He leans in. The hands look. They're shaped like mine. You glance again. He's right. Not exactly, but close. The curve of the fingers. The split in the glove. A small chip in the middle knuckle. Someone paid attention. Someone playing a joke. You ask, but he doesn't answer, just stares. You both decide to walk away from it for now. In the corridor, near the ledger room, another carving has appeared. Just initials this time. S.T. Inside a salt circle. No one in the mine has those initials. Not anymore. When you ask the steward, he clears his throat and says nothing, but his eyes drift, almost involuntarily, toward the St. Kinga Chapel, and he excuses himself shortly after, back at your bench. Your hands are dry. Too dry. The salt has cracked your knuckles again, opening tiny fissures that sting when you flex. You soak them in brine to ease the ache. But the cuts don't bleed, just seep clear fluid, almost like salt water. You don't mention it. That night, you dream of someone standing at the foot of your cot, not threatening, not moving, just there, watching, their hands held up, glowing faintly with salt veins, like Piotr's eyes in low light. You wake up sweating, but when you light a candle, there's no one there, only the faint imprint of two palms on the wall, as if pressed there with gentle pressure. You touch them, still warm. You whisper a quiet thanks. You're not sure why. And the next morning, someone has scrubbed the statue clean, only to find a new one in its place. This time with your face. The hands, still outstretched, still listening. It begins subtly, as most strange things do in the mind. You reach for your pickaxe, always propped against the chapel alcove, right? Where you've left it every day for 3 years, and it's gone. You check beside the bench, under the cloth tarp, along the ledge, where Stanisław sometimes leaves his sharpening stone. Nothing. Then you round the corner, just past the St. Kinga carving, and there it is, resting neatly on the far side of the tunnel, perfectly upright, as though it had been placed there carefully, respectfully. You look around. No one nearby. You retrieve it quietly. No questions asked. You don't even mention it to Stanisław. Not at first. You tell yourself you're tired, distracted. Maybe you moved it without realizing. But then it happens again. Your hand brush, your copper trowel, your backup chisel, the good one with the dark handle and your name etched into the side. Each vanishes from its usual resting place. Each reappears somewhere nearby, always arranged with a strange kind of precision. Not scattered, not dropped. Arranged. You try to laugh it off, but Stanisław doesn't laugh. They say the mind likes to tidy up. He murmurs one evening, watching you retrieve your whetstone from a crevice you definitely didn't put it in. Like a maid, he shrugs. Like a host, you stare at him. He shrugs again. It's just what they say. Later, as you sort through the communal tool crate, you find a carving knife with a handle you don't recognize. It's not from your shift group. The grip is wrapped in deep red cord, smooth and cool to the touch. No rust, no dust. You ask around. No one claims it. You place it gently back in the crate, but when you return 10 minutes later, it's gone. You start paying attention. Every time you turn your back, something shifts. A rope loop falls from a peg. A ladle moves from one barrel to another. A pile of salt dust sweeps itself into a tidy line near your boots. You test it. One evening, before your shift ends, you lay your hammer deliberately crooked across the chapel bench, just a little enough to notice. When you return after supper, it's been turned, straightened, aligned with the seam in the stone. Stanisław notices, says nothing, but you catch him doing the same thing the next day, leaving a wedge turned sideways. It, too, is later corrected. The mind doesn't like untidy tools. Apparently, you begin to wonder how long it's been this way. Maybe you've just started noticing. Maybe this has always happened, unnoticed, hidden among the rhythms of tired men and forgotten habits. But then something escalates. One morning, you arrive at your station to find every tool neatly arranged in a circle, perfectly spaced, centered around your lantern. No one saw who did it. The other workers swear they didn't touch a thing. You hesitate before breaking the circle. It feels rude, intrusive, like interrupting a conversation you weren't meant to hear. Stanisław breaks it for you. He steps forward, lifts his wedge, and mutters, "We still have work to do. The circle is broken." The day continues. But something in the air feels different now. Not angry, just attentive. You try not to think about it until the next shift, when you find a message, not carved, written, in ash on the salt floor. 3 words. You forgot this. Beside it lies your glove. You're sure, absolutely sure you took it with you yesterday. You pick it up slowly. It's warm. No one else saw the message. By the time you return with Stanisław, it's been smudged away. Just footprints and dust. But your glove is still in your hand. That night, as you drift off in your cot, you dream of someone carefully organizing your tools soft. Careful hands with skin like salt crystal. No face, just the sensation of neatness, of someone helping. When you wake, everything in your pack is perfectly folded, your bread wrapped tighter, your water skin resealed. The knot in your bootlace has been tied in a way you don't know. You say nothing, but you whisper, "Thank you," to no one in particular. And the next time you leave your hammer behind on purpose, it returns before sunrise, shining slightly, as though it's been polished. No matter how careful you are, how tightly you wrap your scarf, how often you rinse your mouth with brine or spit into the corners, the salt still gets in. Always. It settles in your hair. It creeps into the crease of your elbows. It nestles in the lining of your boots. But the worst is your mouth, when the dust lingers just behind your molars and crunches softly when you bite, like you're chewing sand at the edge of a dream. Today it's worse than usual. You wake with it already there, coating your tongue like chalk. You try to swallow it, but it resettles with every breath, with every word, with every exhale into the air that tastes of centuries. Stanisław says it's a sign the brine is rising. You can feel it in the tongue before you feel it in your boots. He says, biting into a strip of dried onion. That's why old miners never trusted a dry mouth. You nod and drink deeply from your flask. The water helps barely, still tinged with mineral, still sharp on the sides of your tongue. But it dulls the edges for a little while. Your first task today is in the narrow ventilation tunnel. A less glamorous job scraping salt buildup from the support vents so that air can pass freely from one shaft to another. It's tight work. You crawl on hands and knees, your pack strapped awkwardly to your back. The light from your candle making the walls glisten like bone under skin. That's where the taste returns, not just in your mouth, but in your nose, in your eyes. The air here is different, heavier. There's no breeze, just the stale motion of old breath and evaporated sweat. The salt thickens. It makes it sticky. It clings to your lashes, to the fuzz of your coat collar. You cough once and feel a grain land on your tongue. Crunch. You keep going. At the far end of the vent, someone's etched another message into the wall, crudely scratched, as though with a nail. Taste and see. You don't touch it. You just scrape the vent clean and back your way out. Stanisław is waiting at the tunnel mouth with a smirk. You look like a salted trout. You spit into the dust. It lands in a small, gritty puddle, better than looking like the steward. Fair. He tosses you a bit of lemon peel from his satchel. Suck on this. Kills the taste. You do. It helps a little. Mostly, it just replaces one bitterness with another. As you walk back toward the chapel area, the dust in your mouth shifts. Less sharp now, almost sweet, just faintly, like the memory of a pastry. You pause. That's new. Stanisław raises an eyebrow. What is? You stick out your tongue. Salt. Yes, but something else. Sugar. You whisper. He leans in. No one brings sugar down here. You both go quiet. There's a silence between you, not the silence of friends thinking the same thought, but the silence of people trying not to. Back at the tool bench, your satchel lies open. You didn't leave it open. Inside, nestled between your gloves and your spare chisel, is a wrapped bit of paper. Oh, stiff, folded precisely. You unwrap it slowly. Inside is a small, hard lump. You sniff it. Sugar, real sugar, burned slightly, like the crust of a pie. You and Stanislav exchange a glance. Yeah, he shakes his head. If he had sugar, he'd be throwing it at people, not leaving secret pastries. You rewrap it. Place it gently back in your satchel. The rest of your shift is uneventful, but the taste never leaves your mouth. Sweet and salty, like memory, like temptation. That night, as you drift off, you dream you are back in the chapel. The St. Kinga statue is crumbling just slightly, and from the cracks pours not dust, but sugar, fine, white, glowing. You reach out to catch it, and it clings to your hands like snow. When you wake, your pillow tastes faintly of burnt crust. You check your satchel. The sugar's gone, but your gloves smell like cinnamon. And scratched into the wall above your cot is a single word. Remember. Just that, as if someone knew you'd try to forget. You're not supposed to go down that tunnel. Everyone knows it. There's no sign, no rope, no gate, but, it's the kind of knowing that sits in your spine and whispers when you're near it. It's not even especially hidden, just unremembered. It begins after your shift ends early. A water cart broke near the north shaft, so work is paused until Mirek can patch the barrel. Most of the others head back to their bunks or linger in the chapel with their salted chess set and lukewarm beetroot tea. But you drift, absent-mindedly, one step at a time. You find yourself in the eastern gallery, past the pulley hall and the worn lantern rack. It's quiet here. The air hums a little, not loud, not pressing, just a faint vibration, like the low note of a stringed instrument plucked somewhere beneath your boots. You reach the end of the gallery and stop. To your left, the usual passage, steady, lit, full of voices and boots. To your right, the tunnel, unlit, unused, unwelcoming. And yet, your foot moves before your mind agrees. It's colder here. The walls are dry, the salt flaking in long, paper-thin curls that crunch softly under your boots. You pass abandoned tools, an old brush, a cracked bucket, a coil of rope stiff as bone, none of it touched in years. Then, just ahead, a shape, a door, not a real one, just a section of wall, slightly recessed, framed by two wooden beams blackened with time. You run your hand along the stone. Smooth. Too smooth. You press, and it opens, not dramatically. Just a low creak, a slight give, a seam slips loose, and the salt folds inward to reveal a chamber untouched by boots or breath for decades, maybe centuries. Your candlelight spills in, hesitant. The room is small, round, no larger than a cellar, but every inch of the walls is covered in carvings, layer upon layer, delicate and dense, as if someone spent years whispering secrets into the salt. Names, dates, eyes, so many eyes, some open, some closed, some scratched out. And at the center of the chamber stands a figure, salt-carved, life-size, a miner. You think, the figure wears no crown, no robe, just work clothes, a chisel in one hand. The other hand is held out, palm up, cupped, as if waiting. Your breath catches. The salt in the air is thicker here, warmer. You kneel, instinctively, without thinking why. You reach out and gently place your gloved hand in the sculpture's palm. It's warm, faintly, like someone just stepped away. You draw back slowly, On the floor, near the figure's base, is a small pile of carved tokens, scraps of wood, bits of candle stub, smoothed shards of pottery, offerings. You add your glove. It feels right. As you rise, you glance again at the carvings on the wall, and now you see your name there, near the base, scratched in softly, faint, but real. You blink, touch it, still fresh. Your candle sputters once, just once, and then steadies again. You take one step backward, then two. You leave the chamber as you found it. No one sees you return to the main shaft. You say nothing to Stanisław. Not yet. That night, your dreams are full of names being whispered. None of them yours, or all of them. You wake with a single line stuck in your head, etched there like salt on your skin. When you are forgotten, we remember. You check your pack. Your glove is gone, but in its place is a smooth, salt carving of your hand, palm up, cupped, waiting. And later that day, when you walk past the chamber again, it's gone. No tunnel, no Sam, just a wall, smooth, too smooth. They tell you not to think too much about what's above the mind. Not because it's dangerous, though, of course. It is but because it's distracting. Keep your mind on the shaft in front of you. The steward says, not on what's growing in someone's cabbage patch. But today, your shaft assignment brings you directly beneath the bishop's estate. You can feel it in the air, a faint, organic scent drifting down turned soil, crushed mint, the sweetness of roots, and something else too, lilac, maybe, faint and old, the scent of something meant to bloom far from eyes like yours. You and Stanisław are assigned to reinforce the western buttress, a thick, load-bearing wall that carries much of the estate's weight above. The shaft is narrow and arched, with wooden ribs bolted into the salt like the bones of a buried ship. The light here is golden, somehow diffused. Your candles burn slower. Everything feels slower. You pick your way across the floor, boots crunching on fine powder, and begin the day's task, removing old supports, replacing them one by one with newer, tar-soaked beams. It's hard work, but quiet, measured, and that's when you notice it. The salt beneath your hands is warm, not hot, not even truly warm, but not cold, not like the rest. You run your fingers across a patch near the support wall. The salt is smoother, finer, almost oiled, and faintly pink. You scratch a bit off. It smells faintly of roses. You call Stanisław over. He frowns. Scented salt. From above, you say. He nods. That would be the bishop's wife's garden. They say she imported roses from Provence. You both sit in silence a moment. There's something strange about working directly beneath such beauty. The idea that, while you kneel in brine and dust, someone above is pruning lilies in silk gloves. You feel the pressure of it, the weight of privilege, quite literally overhead. Every flower bed, a ceiling beam, every garden gate, a crossbeam in the shaft below. Stanisław wipes his brow. They held a wedding above here once. He says, lavish thing, trumpets, incense, doves. You glance up, as if you might hear faint music through the rock. They say the vibration cracked the salt slab. He adds, grinning, of course it did. You drive the wedge deeper into the support socket, and a small tremor runs up your arm. Not an earthquake, just a thump, rhythmic. Above, a footstep. No, heavier. You both freeze. Then again thump. It repeats, slow, methodical, almost like horse. You whisper. Stanisław shakes his head. Too heavy. You both strain to hear. Then it stops. You let the silence return. That's always the safest thing to do. Let it settle. Let the mind forget. It was trying to get your attention. You finish setting the support, but as you drive in the last spike, you notice something wedged between the salt seams. A root, a real one, pale, fibrous, curling like a thin finger between the crystals. It shouldn't be here. Roots don't grow into salt. They shrivel. But this one is alive. You reach for it. It pulses, not like a heartbeat, more like breath. You both step back. You do not touch it again. Instead, you fill the seam with wax and stone dust, sealing it tight, not out of fear, but out of courtesy, whatever it is. It's reaching down. Let it keep reaching. You're not the one it's looking for. Later that day, when you pass through the prayer alcove, you notice a new carving near the bench. A flower, unfinished, but clearly a rose, thorns etched carefully, petals spiraling out. You kneel beside it, curious. Inside the rose's center, someone has carved a tiny figure, a miner, curled like a seed. You look around. No one in sight. You don't touch it. That night, when you drift to sleep, you dream of gardens blooming underground, of vines growing from the ceiling, dangling salt blossoms that hum softly in the candlelight. You walk among them, your boots sinking into brine-soaked soil, and just before you wake, you see her, the bishop's wife, smiling faintly. Her hands are covered in dirt, but her gloves are white, and in the morning, the roses above are found covered in salt crust, and no one can explain how it rained only on the bishop's garden. There is no time in the mine. Not really. No bells. No soon. No roosters or church chimes. Your day is shaped by muscle memory and the slow turning of your own body's clock. A clock that grows fuzzier the longer it lives underground. But the mine has its own timekeeper, a drip from the ceiling of an old shaft once used to store brine. A single drop falls every few seconds into a pewter cup nailed to a wooden beam. It's been there as long as anyone can remember. No one knows who placed the cup. No one dares move it. You hear it now as you enter the shaft, a slow rhythm echoing faintly off the salt walls. Drip. The pause, long enough for breath. Drip. Stanisław once told you that some miners used the brine drip to mark their shifts. They'd sit in the alcove with a tallied board and count how many drops pass between candle changes. 300 drips to lunch, 600 to quitting. That kind of thing. It's not precise, but it feels true. You kneel beside the cup now, watching it catch another perfect drop. The brine sparkles in the candlelight, thick and clear. Like glass in motion, the surface trembles, then stills. You listen. Drip. It's soothing, almost hypnotic. You've passed this shaft 100 times, but today, something draws you in. You set your tools down and lean against the wall, letting your eyes blur. The sound wraps around you like a lullaby. Drip. It's almost musical. You realize, not just in rhythm, but in tone. Every few drops, the sound shifts slightly higher, slightly deeper, like a song being played by a very patient musician. A lullaby for salt. You close your eyes. Drip. In the quiet that follows, you hear something new. A second drip. Fainter, not in sync, coming from deeper in the shaft. You open your eyes, glance toward the shadows. There's another cup. You've never seen it before. Identical pewter, mounted on a stone shelf, barely visible from the main tunnel. You approach it slowly, candle raised. This one is nearly full, but the drips are coming faster. Drip, 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 like a heartbeat speeding up. You check the ceiling. No pipe, no channel, just a smooth stretch of salt. The liquid appears from a tiny fissure, steady and silent. You crouch beside it. The brine here is darker, not quite red, but not clear either. You sniff it. It smells old, like metal and rosemary, and something sharp you can't name. Behind you, Stanisław clears his throat. You startle, nearly knock over the full cup. Easy, he says. You gesture to the second drip. Was this here yesterday? He tilts his head. Maybe that's not helpful. He shrugs. It's the mine. Things come and go. You watch as another drop falls, this one slower. The rhythm changes again. The two cups are out of sync now. First cup, second cup, first, second. A pattern. You lean back on your heels. It's marking something. You murmur. Stanisław doesn't answer, but he doesn't disagree either. Later, you return with your dinner. Somehow, cold beet soup and half a slice of cheese, and sit in front of the first cup again. You count 100 drips. Nothing happens. 200. Still nothing. At 300, you hear something behind you. Not a sound. A shift, like a sigh in the walls. You turn. The second cup is empty. You blink. You could have sworn it was nearly full. You reach for it. Still damp. No puddle. No splash. Gone. The shaft feels colder now. You pack up slowly, leaving both cups as you found them. You don't speak of it to anyone, not even Stanisław, but you do something you've never done before. You start counting the drips in your head, all night long, even in your dreams. Drip, drip, drip. And when you wake, there's a cup beside your cot. Pefter, empty, waiting, and etched faintly on its side, in the soft corrosion of age, is your name spelled perfectly, with the middle letter turned backward, just like you used to write it as a child. It begins with polished boots, too polished, shiny in a way that makes the salt walls seem shabby, like they're suddenly aware of their own dust. The boots are followed by coats long, dark, woolen things that carry the scent of surface rain and official ink. Then come the men themselves, the mold inspectors. You've seen them before, though not often. They arrive once or twice a year, always unannounced, and always walking like they expect the walls to curtsy. No one knows exactly what they inspect. Mold, certainly. Spores. They say fungal encroachments, structural infestations of something not quite plant and not quite stone. You suspect they're just sent to remind you someone up there still remembers you exist. This time, they arrive in the middle of your shift. Two of them, tall, dry, blinking a little too much, like the candlelight doesn't agree with their academic eyes. They carry thick ledgers under their arms and wear gloves so clean they might be made of wax. Proceed as if we're not here. One says, of course. Everyone proceeds as if they're exactly there. You and Stanisław exchange a glance. He winks. Let's show them the friendly side of fungus. You return to your post, carving reinforcement notches into the chapel corridor. Behind you, you can hear the inspectors muttering, pointing, scribbling, sniffing. One of them taps the salt wall with a silver instrument that looks suspiciously like a teaspoon. They always smell like vinegar. Stanisław mutters, leaning close. That's how you know they're real. You nod, inhaling the faint tang trailing behind them. It's true. Vinegar, pepper, and something faintly herbal lavender. Perhaps, or crushed thyme. One pauses near the carved Saint Kinga. He frowns. Has this always glowed? You freeze. The glow isn't bright, just a shimmer, a softness around the curls you carved weeks ago. It's the kind of thing you've seen 100 times. Candlelight catching at the right angle. But now, under the scrutiny of a man with a notebook and a silver spoon, it feels excessive. She's just clean. You say quickly. He jots something in his book. The other inspector taps the salt beneath the statue, then tilts his head. This brine pool hasn't moved. Stanisław steps in smoothly. No, sir, but sometimes it gets opinionated. You nearly cough. The inspector stares. Stanisław smiles like a man who hasn't eaten a vegetable in 3 weeks and isn't about to start. The rest of their inspection continues in silence. They test the air. They scrape a sample from the northern shaft. One of them accidentally leans against a sacred carving and mutters an apology to the salt. You don't tell him that was probably a wise idea. Then, just as quietly as they arrived, they pack up their tools, snap shut their ledgers, and begin the slow march back toward the surface elevator, but not before one pauses beside your tool bench. He picks up the chisel, the bone-colored one. You didn't leave it out. He turns it in his hand, frowns. Unusual weight, he says. Where did this come from? You consider lying, but instead, you say, it was here when I arrived. He nods slowly, then tucks the chisel into his coat. I'll take this for analysis. Stanisław opens his mouth to protest, but you shake your head. Let it go. They disappear up the shaft. The air feels immediately lighter, but as the silence returns, you can't help but glance toward the St. Kinga statue. Her eyes look different. Not angry, not sad, just watching. That night, when you return to your cot, there's something new in your pack. A letter, unsealed, handwritten, returned for your safety. It didn't like being cataloged. Inside the envelope, the bone chisel, still cold, still wrong. You hide it beneath your blanket. And for the first time in years, you dream not of tunnels or candlelight, but of white-coated men walking in circles, forever lost in corridors that never end. And in the chapel, St. Kinga's veil has been dusted with something new, a fine gray mold shaped like a spiral, gently pulsing in the dark. You don't get paid in coins, not usually. There's too much dust, too much damp, metal corrodes, ink smears, paper wilts. Down here, wages are marked in the ledger, an enormous tome, bound in black leather, its spine swollen with humidity, its pages stiff with age and salt crystals. It lives in a stone alcove off the steward's office, resting on its own slab of rock like a sleeping beast. You enter the ledger room only once a month. Some miners come in nervous, shoulders hunched, afraid. A misaligned column will mean missing bread. Others strut in like they own the mine. You've always come quietly, nodding to the steward, signing where instructed, and slipping out before the ink dries. Today feels different. The steward isn't in his chair. The room is colder than usual. The candles are already lit, but the light doesn't quite reach the corners. You step in slowly, boots clicking faintly on the tiled salt floor, and approach the book. It's open. That's unusual. You look around, but you're alone. The page is familiar. Your Rao, your name, neatly scratched in with the steward's signature below. Except now, there's something new. Another entry, not in his handwriting. Below your name, someone has added 3 lines in looping script, darker than the others, as though the ink was fresher, or the pen was deeper. Payment rendered, wage accepted, mark sealed. You blink. That's not how entries are made. There's no tally, no coin notation, no salt quantity recorded, just those 3 lines. You lean closer, your fingertip brushes the edge of the ink. Still damp, you draw back, heart thudding softly, not out of fear, but confusion. The room suddenly feels full, though no one enters. You glance behind you, nothing, but when you look back, the ink is dry. You reach for the steward's bell. It's missing. Instead, On the chair where he usually sits, there's a small pouch tied with red thread. You untie it. Inside, 3 smooth salt stones, unmarked, heavy for their size, perfectly shaped, one round, one oval, one spiral. You turn them in your hand. They don't feel like ordinary salt. Warmer, denser. You place them gently back in the pouch and tuck it into your coat. That's when you hear the voice, faint, from the ledger. Not speech. Exactly, just the soft scrape of quill on parchment, as though someone were still writing. You open the book again. New words appear. Witnessed, appointed, remembered. No pen moves. The words simply exist. Stanisław appears behind you a moment later, rubbing his jaw. You were gone a while, he says. You show him the entry. He stares, whistles. Then, guess you got a promotion. You laugh. Because you have to, but the air tastes dry, thirsty in your mouth, like you've just chewed on parchment. You close the ledger softly, as if not to disturb it. Do you think, you murmur, that someone else is keeping the books now? Stanisław nods slowly. There are always more ledgers. You leave together, saying nothing more. Later, back in your sleeping quarters, you empty the pouch into your hand again. The stones rest cool and quiet in your palm. But as you hold them, you begin to remember things, not dreams, not quite memories, moments. A lantern dropped in the northern shaft. A whisper from the wall behind St. Kinga. The feeling of someone brushing past you on a ladder, and when you turned, no one was there. All of it returns, neatly, softly, as though listed in a column beside your name. You set the stones on your bedside shelf. That night, when you close your eyes, you see the ledger again. But this time, you're the one holding the pen, and across from you sits a man made of salt, gently nodding, tapping the page with a long, spiral-tipped finger. And when you wake, your signature is scrawled across your blanket in fine, white dust, looping and unmistakable. Though you haven't held a quill in weeks, it's the sound you miss most. The flutter, that sudden whoosh of feathered wings cutting through still air. The tiny percussive feet tapping against roof tiles, cooing into the sun. Pigeons, they crowd the square above the mine, fat with breadcrumbs and cathedral echoes. You haven't seen one in years, not in daylight, not in the feather, but you hear them sometimes, in your head, in your memory, in the soft, flapping echoes that come down the shaft on good days. Days when the wind is just right, and you swear you can smell pastry from the baker's stall 3 streets over. Today is one of those days. You're stationed beneath the oldest shaft, the one that runs, so rumor says, straight up to the square behind the Krakow Cathedral. Most shafts have long since collapsed or been bricked over, but this one, it still breathes. You feel it when you stand near the wall. Small shifts in pressure, that gentle tickle across your cheek. Like the mine is exhaling, Stanisław is whistling again, not loudly, not the kind that invites collapse or curses, just a soft tune from a lullaby. He keeps time with his pick, tapping out the beat like a drum. Ever think about the surface? He asks. You glance over. Only when I'm hungry. He chuckles. I had a pigeon once, named her Janka. She'd sit on my windowsill every morning and look offended if I didn't offer something. What happened to her? He shrugs. She found someone with better bread. You both laugh. And yet, the memory lingers. You get back to work. Your pick strikes the salt with a comforting thunk, chipping away layers of mineral as old as empires. Each blow releases a puff of dust that settles on your boots and sleeves like dry snow. The rhythm is familiar, meditative, Then comes the flutter. Not in your head this time. Real. You both freeze. There it is. Again. Flutter thump. Flutter thump. Like wings against wood. Not from the shaft above, but from deeper in the tunnel. You exchange a glance with Stanisław. He raises an eyebrow. At. You offer. Sounds heavier. You inch toward the sound. Lantern raised. The air shifts again. Feather light. And then you see it. A single feather. White. Tipped in gray. Lying on the stone floor. Like it drifted down from a Sunday sky. You kneel. Pick it up. Still soft. Still warm. There's no way it could have come from the surface. You're too deep. Too far. You both stare at it for a long time. Stanisław breaks the silence. You know what this means. Don't you? You look up. We're losing our minds. He smirks. That, too. But also, maybe they still come down. The pigeons, why would a pigeon come down here? He shrugs. Maybe someone's feeding them. The idea seems impossible. And yet, the shaft above isn't sealed. It narrows at the top, like the chimney of a forgotten fireplace. If a bird were small enough, curious enough. Later that day, near the chapel, you find more feathers. Not a lot, just 2 or 3, tucked into a crack in the wall. Arranged, maybe, or accidental. You don't mention them. But that evening, as you eat your dinner in the common chamber, you hear it again, flutter, then coo, so soft it might be breath. You stand, walk slowly to the entrance, and look up the long tunnel that leads to the shaft. Nothing. Then something flits past the torchlight. Not a bat. Wider wings. You blink. Gone. You return to your cot late, body aching from the day's work. You unwrap your scarf. Salt dust tumbles onto your lap, and with it, another feather, nestled in the folds. Not yours, not from below. From above, you press it into your ledger, between 2 blank pages, just before sleep takes you. You think you hear tapping light and insistent, not a knock, not a tool, the sound of beak on wood. And in the morning, someone has drawn a pigeon on your wall, in salt dust smiling, wearing a miner's cap. The cap looks suspiciously like yours. You've lit thousands of candles down here, thick ones and thin ones, yellow, white, some faintly blue, tallow that smells like old stew and beeswax that reminds you of sunlit windows you haven't seen in months. Most sputter, most bend, most give up halfway through a shift smothered by damp drafts or burnt down to a sagging coil of wick and ash. But not this one. This one burns steady. Even now. You found it 2 days ago, tucked behind a broken slab in the chapel alcove. No dust on it. No bite marks from the rats. Just there, waiting. The wax was smooth, white-gray, with faint spirals down its sides. You lit it, expecting nothing. It hasn't flickered since. Rainstorms have blown through. Brine steam has warped beams. Someone dropped a hammer nearby and shattered a row of votive glass. But the candle, still burning. You stare at it now. In the quiet hour before supper, your shift is over, and the others are already halfway through their boiled turnips and salt bread. You stayed behind, just to watch. The flame doesn't dance. It doesn't shrink. It's small, compact, precise, like it knows it's on duty. The wax doesn't melt right. Instead of puddling, it recedes inwards, curling in upon itself, like it's being sipped rather than burned. Stanisław finds you sitting in front of it, cross-legged like a novice. He says nothing at first, just sits beside you. You going to name it? He finally asks. You blink. What? He gestures to the candle. It's clearly alive. Might as well give it a name. You chuckle. Any suggestions? Flummock. You groan. No. Lumino? Absolutely not. He shrugs. You're the one worshiping it. You're not? Of course. You just respect it. In the way you respect a tool that always works, or a shortcut that never fails. There's something comforting in its stubbornness. It's the only thing in the mind that behaves exactly as it should, and never in a way you expect. You lean closer. The candle smells faintly of something familiar. Not wax, not smoke. Cinnamon. No. Nutmeg. Baked apples. You stand abruptly. Did someone bring food down? Stanisław sniffs the air. I smell it too. You both glance toward the flame. It's brighter now. You squint. There's something in the wax. Something under the surface. Near the wick. A shape. Small. Dark. Not flickering. You blow gently, not enough to extinguish. Just enough to disturb the flame. It doesn't move. So you reach for it. The wax is warm, but not hot. It parts easily under your fingers. Pliant and yielding, like soft clay. You dig gently. The object comes loose. It's a tooth. You both stare at it. Small. Human. Maybe a child's. Clean. Perfectly preserved. No root. Absolutely not. Stanisław says, standing. But you don't drop it. You hold it in your palm. Then glance at the candle. It still burns, unbothered. A few moments later, the wax closes in over the space where the tooth had been, smoothing itself like water leveling after a ripple. Stanisław mutters a prayer. You return the tooth to the base of the candle, pressing it lightly into the salt floor. The candle flares just once, then steadies. You eat in silence that night, and when you return to the chapel to check, it's still burning. The flame watches you. That night, you dream of a banquet underground. Dozens of candles lining a stone table, each with something small inside. A ring, a locket, a coin, a tooth, a broken button. People sit at the table, quiet, content, waiting. At the head of the table is a child, smiling. His eyes are made of wax. When you wake, your fingers smell faintly of cinnamon, and the candle still burning. And beside it, someone has left a second tooth. This one flat, polished, and marked with a tiny spiral on the enamel. You don't ask whose it was. You always knew the mine was musical. Not in the human way, not a whistle and tune sort of thing, but in the deep, ancient way that stones sometimes sing when no one listens. There are sounds down here you've grown so used to. You stopped hearing them. A rhythmic creak, a faint hiss of brine sliding down a shaft wall, the pop of old wood settling after centuries under pressure. But sometimes the mine gets organized. It starts during the late shift, while you and Stanisław are helping patch the southern tunnel. Nothing fancy, just slapping a mix of resin and grit into cracked salt walls. You're on your knees with a trowel, boots soaked, arms heavy, and then you hear it, a low tone, not quite a groan, not quite a whistle, somewhere between the two. You pause, then it happens again, but harmonized. One groan followed by another, deeper, like two massive throats humming a hymn. Only they remember. It echoes gently through the corridor, refracted and reshaped by every bend in the tunnel. You and Stanisław both freeze. The sound grows. A drip joins in, tapping on the far shaft wall in a clean, metronome-perfect rhythm. Then another, higher, faster, then a slow groan from overhead, creaking timber, calling down like a bass singer in a midnight choir. The mine is singing, not a song, not a song anyone could write, but a layering of sounds so intentional it feels like a composition. Stanisław whispers, "Do you hear that harmony?" You nod. I think the mine's praying. You both stand, slowly, neither of you dares speak again. The air seems to pulse with quiet meaning. You walk, softly, toward the central shaft, where the echoes converge. The path feels different now. Not darker, just quieter, like the mind is drawing in breath between notes. Then you reach the chamber. It's one of the old ones, Prekazimierz. Some say forgotten, unearthed by accident a few decades ago, but too unstable for regular use. You've only ever seen it once, when they gave you the grand tour during your first month. Now it's filled with sound. No people, no tools, just sound, drips landing like chimes on crystal, brine echoing in carved bowls like flutes filled with wind, stone settling in low, reverent groans that shake your ribs but not your resolve. And at the center of the chamber, a salt pillar, weed, massive, covered in ridges, not natural. You've passed it before, never thought twice. But now, it looks like an organ pipe. No, not looks like. Is the mine has built its own instrument. Or perhaps someone else did. Long ago, you and Stanisław don't move. You barely breathe. You listen, and the mine plays. It lasts minutes, maybe hours. A tone for every tunnel, a sigh for every shaft, a long, low note for every forgotten name. And then it fades one drip at a time, until the last sound is silence. You look at each other. Nothing needs to be said. But later, back at your bunk, you find something strange. A smooth piece of salt, rounded, ridged, carved faintly on one side. 4 lines. Not music notes exactly, but something close. The spacing, the angle's almost a melody. You show it to Stanisław the next day. He touches it and hums the same tune perfectly. Neither of you knows what it means, but you keep it anyway, in your coat pocket, close to your heart. That night, you dream of candles arranged like choir boys, flames rising and falling in time with unseen hands. And beneath their song, you hear it again, the mind's music, this time with your name in the melody. And in the morning, your trowel hums when you pick it up softly. Just once, as though remembering the chord. You don't know her name. You only know the gown. You first see it while helping shore up the northeast gallery your 3rd week on the rotation. The old part, the part even the steward mutters about. The walls here are scalloped with water damage, and everything smells faintly of burnt sugar and limestone. You're hauling timber through a narrow corridor when your lantern catches something in the dark. A glint of white. You stop. Hold your breath. It's fabric. No, not fabric. Salt. Crystallized. Sculpted. Feather-thin sheets draped from ceiling to floor like a veil. Like a wedding veil. Like someone carefully sculpted a bride into the wall and left her here unmoving, unfinished, untouched. Stanisław finds you staring. He stops. 2. Then, in a whisper so quiet, you almost miss it. He says, "Not again." You look over sharply. He shakes his head. "Don't worry. She never moves. Just stands there." Who made it? He shrugs. No one admits to it. No one can admit to it. She's always been here. You return to the chamber 2 days later with a fresh candle and a quiet heart. This time, you sit down. You stare at her. She doesn't blink. The gown is astonishing, layer upon layer of salt crystal folds arranged like lace and linen. It billows in a phantom breeze, thin as eggshell, glistening in the wax light. Her hands are clasped. Her head is bowed. You half expect her to turn toward you, but she doesn't. She never does. Later, you hear whispers. Miners call her the Salt Bride. Some say she was carved by a lonely steward. Others claim she was formed by dripping brine, by accident or fate. One man swears she's the spirit of a girl buried alive in a collapsed shaft, forever waiting for the wedding that never came. You ask Stanislav again. He's more tired this time. Long ago, he says, a man died just feet from her, picked too hard. Shaft cracked. He collapsed, and she was the last thing he saw. He pauses, but his face... He was smiling. You don't ask again, but she stays in your thoughts. You start visiting on your breaks. You begin to talk to her, not in a mad way, just little things. Today, I carved a perfect corner brace. Stanisław sang again. He's terrible. Someone stole my spoon. I think the ledger did it. Each time, you sit, you wait. She never answers. But one day, something changes. The veil is different. A fold shifted, slightly. Not carved, not disturbed, just changed. You feel it in your spine. That evening, you dream of a wedding, not yours, not hers, but someone's. A procession through salt corridors, candles lining the path, boots crunching on salted petals. The bride walks beside you. You can't see her face. Everyone is silent. Everyone is waiting. Then, a voice not loud, not stern, but solemn says, "Do you take this salt?" You wake before you answer. The next morning, a single petal lies beside your boot, carved from salt and faintly etched with your initials. You return to her chamber after shift. She hasn't moved, but now a bouquet rests in her hands. Tiny salt blossoms, each with 5 perfect petals, one missing its center. You kneel, not in reverence, just habit. And behind her, something new, a faint carving in the wall, nearly vanished. 2 figures. One carries a pickaxe, the other holds a candle, and between them, a circle, a ring. You don't tell anyone, but you leave behind your spare glove, your good one, as an offering. That night, your candle burns steady. No dreams, only peace. And in the morning, someone has folded your blanket in the shape of a gown, and beneath it rests a salt petal ring that fits your finger exactly. The last tunnel. Hey guys, tonight we're going to follow one last path. A path worn down not just by boots and brine, but by memory, by the soft repetition of footsteps so old. Even the salt forgets how to echo them. And tonight, this tunnel might be yours. No, not in a haunted way. Not in the you'll never return kind of tale. More like a thread unraveling slowly into sleep. A corridor made of breath and soot and gentle dripping sounds. The kind that never quite ends. The kind that never really wants to. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you've made it this far, I'd love to know where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's final journey together. The last tunnel isn't marked on any map. Not really. Oh, it has a number, a ledger entry, an access code no one remembers how to read. But it's always been there, hiding behind old timber, waiting beneath peeling chalk marks and long extinguished torches. You find it when you're not looking, when your shift runs late, when Stanislav sends you back for one more nail, and the others have gone ahead. That's when you notice the gap, just a sliver in the wall, just wide enough to pass through sideways. You squeeze in, not expecting much. But the passage doesn't stop. It continues deeper, darker, drier than any part of the mine you've ever seen. The salt here doesn't sparkle. It absorbs. The walls don't echo. They listen. And the air, it's still heavy with meaning. You walk, Your lamp flickers, but doesn't fail. Your boots scuff gently along the stone floor, now perfectly smooth, as if sanded by 1,000 invisible hands. And then the carvings begin. Tiny ones at first, a spiral here, a crooked star there, then more. Names, dates, smiling faces. A dog, a loaf of bread, a spoon, a candle. You stop at one, carving your own name, perfectly scratched into the wall beside a curled fern, just above a shape that looks suspiciously like your lunch satchel. You didn't do this. You never came this far. But here it is. You press your palm against the wall. The salt is cool and still, but it remembers. You walk on. Eventually, the tunnel opens into a room. Not big, but not small either. It feels exactly your size. Inside, a table carved from stone, a bench, a shelf, a candle, already lit, and something on the table, waiting. A journal, blank pages, except the first one, your handwriting. You don't remember writing it. But it says, if you found this, you've made it to the quiet part. Write something or don't. Either way, the salt will remember. You sit. You open the second page. A fresh quill lies beside the book. The ink is warm. You write a single word. Today, then another. Peace. You leave the book open. The candle flickers once, then stills. When you return to the main shaft, no time has passed. Not really. Stanislav is still yelling about lost nails. Someone's still singing off-key. The brine still drips in lazy time, but the salt feels different now. It recognizes you. That night, you sleep more deeply than you have in weeks, and you dream not of shafts or creaking beams, but of pages, endless pages, filled with stories, not carved, not burned, not spoken, just remembered by something vast and quiet and kind. And when you wake, there's salt dust on your pillow, and a perfect spiral pressed into the corner, like a gentle signature. And now, as your breathing slows and your thoughts begin to float, like lanterns on still water, let this last tunnel stay with you, not as a place, but as a feeling of something deeper than darkness, quieter than silence, and softer than sleep. You've wandered through the salt with me, touched the chisel-worn carvings of lives long folded into the earth, and listened as the mind told its stories, not with words, but with time, with drip and dust and rhythm and echo. And maybe, just maybe, it told a little of your story, too. As you lie there now, eyes heavy, your mind might still trace the lines of that forgotten chamber. You might hear the tap of a distant pickaxe, feel the breath of cool stone against your cheek, or catch the scent of old candles and salted pears and paper so aged it crumbles like dreams in the daylight. You don't need to remember every detail. Just know that somewhere, beneath layers of stone and history and memory, there's a quiet bench with your name on it, and the salt is still listening. So rest easy now. Let the last ember of this story fade into the warm dark.